Hi, I'm Lilia Lewis, and welcome to another edition of Building a Better You. Now, today we're going to be continuing in the book of Proverbs when we're going to go to chapter 10, and it's kind of a continuation of where we left off last week in chapter 1, because chapter 1 was also from Solomon, who was the son of King David. And in the beginning, we spoke about what is a proverb, and we said that it was a short statement that describes an event or principles or rules of conduct. And in this chapter 10, this is also written by Solomon. And in the very first verse, it's almost telling you the same thing that chapter 8 said, or that chapter 1 said, verse 8. So the first verse of this chapter says, "A wise son maketh a glad father." And in chapter 1, verse 8, it said, "My son, hear the instruction of the father." So back then it was saying, listen to the direction your father is giving you. And in this verse it says, if you do, that makes a glad father. So those two verses are pretty much saying the same thing. And also it says, a foolish son is the heaviness of his mother. And back in chapter 1, verse 8, it says, forsake not the law of thy mother. So again, it's saying back there, follow the instruction your father gives you, listen to what your mother tells you. That will make her happy. But if you do not, that brings heaviness upon your mother. So we're going to proceed in chapter 10, and we're going to read forward a few verses, and then we're going to stop and come back and review those. So chapter 2 says, treasures of wickedness profit nothing, but righteousness delivereth from death. The Lord will not suffer the soul of the righteous to famish, but he casteth away the substance of the wicked. He becometh poor that dealeth with a slack hand, but the hand of the diligent make rich. He that gathereth in summer is a wise son, but he that sleepeth in harvest is a son that causeth shame. Blessings are upon the head of the just, but violence covereth the mouth of the wicked. The memory of the just is blessed, but the name of the wicked shall rot. The wise in heart will receive commandments, but the prating fool shall fall. He that walketh upright walketh surely, but he that perverteth his ways shall be known. Now let's stop right there. Now we already reviewed the relationship of verse 1 in each of those chapters. Now verse 2 here says, treasures of wickedness. So that means what we spoke about. Anybody who's taken stuff from somebody else. We spoke last week about how people will try to get you to, come on, go in with us, and we're going to rob somebody, and then we'll split everything between us, anything we get. And this is where it's saying treasures. So if you do that, treasures of wickedness, that profit is nothing. So if you're going to go in with the group and the gang and rob somebody, even though you may get part of whatever was taken, that's short-lived. And we already said, things that are of not God are short-lived. So that's saying it profiteth nothing. But righteousness delivereth from death. And righteousness simply means following God's word, Those that are free from sin, those have God's blessing. The Lord will not suffer the soul of the righteous to famine. And that simply means to not suffer means to not endure. So that's just saying God will take care of us. As long as you're following His word, doing His will, He will take care of us. But He will cast away the substance of the wicked. And that means the importance, the meaning of. Anything that they're thinking of to do, it's going to just make it disappear. It's not going to be beneficial. It's not going to be profitable. So it's telling you constantly in all of the words of Solomon, stay away, do the right thing, because if you don't, you will not benefit. Last week, it told you, it gave you warnings against violence. And it told you what the results would be if you did not accept wisdom. And back there in that verse, in that chapter, he was telling you how to attain wisdom. And now he's telling you the substance will be cast away of the wicked. He becometh poor that dealeth with a slack hand. And a slack hand means laziness, neglect. You're trying to get the easy way out. You're not going to gain anything by that. That means you become poor because you're not gaining anything, because you're not putting forth any effort. Everything that they asked you to come on, go with us, that's just trying to get the easy way out. That is using a slack hand. And to slack means to be neglectful, sluggish, don't want to work. But the hand of the diligent maketh rich. And what does diligent mean? That means putting forth an earnest effort. And in order to do that, you've got to follow God's word. You've got to make it your business not to have a slack hand, not to be lazy, not to try to find the easy way out. He that gathereth in the summer is a wise son, but he that sleepeth in the harvest is a son that causes shame. And that simply means, like they're using that as a crop. So if you're planting your seeds, and then when it's time for the harvest, you're somewhere sleeping, well, you gain nothing. That's not profiting anything. You've got to plant the seeds, and then you've got to sow the seeds, and then you've got to pick the crop. Blessings are upon the head of the just. Blessings. That means as long as we're following God's word, He'll bless us. He'll take care of us. He'll protect us. That's what He does. That's who He is. But violence covereth the mouth of the wicked. The memory of the just is blessed. So people will always remember you. How will people remember you? How will your children remember you? What type of person will they remember you as? But the name of the wicked shall rot. And that simply means nobody will remember you because you've done nothing worth remembering. I want to be worth remembering. I want to do something that people say, oh yeah, I remember her. She was so nice and she was so courteous. She was so kind to everybody. How do you want to be remembered? I want to be blessed. The wise in heart will receive commandments, but a prating fool shall fall. So the wise in heart, that's us again, because we're following the commandments. We're living by the commandments. But a prating fool shall fall. And prating simply means one word, stupid. A stupid person is someone, of course, we know, they just want to do it their way. So they're not going to prosper. They're not going to prosper because they want to do it their way. They want the fast track. He that walketh upright walks surely. So as long as you're walking in God's way, your footsteps will be sure. You won't be wobbly, wishy-washy. You'll have a clear path. But he that perverteth his ways shall be known. And to pervert your ways, that means to corrupt. That means just doing the opposite of whatever is right. And that, his ways shall be known. And that reminds me of, again, something I saw on TV, on the news. The tow truck driver drove home and was getting out of his truck, and the guy ran up behind him with a gun, gonna rob him. But what he didn't know was that the tow truck driver had a gun of his own. So the tow truck driver ended up shooting the would-be robber. And I say all that to say, we spoke last week about the wide path and the narrow path. And everything has consequences. And the consequence of that was the tow truck driver killed the perpetrator. So he gained nothing. He was going to do something he had no business doing, no rhyme, no reason, didn't know the man, and now he has no life. And that's what it's saying here. You've got to stay on God's path. You cannot deviate. I don't care what people say. You can't deviate because you don't know what the outcome will be. Let's proceed. We're going to go down to verse 11. The mouth of the righteous man is a well life, but violence covereth the mouth of the wicked. Hatred stirreth up strife, but love covereth all sins. In the lips of him that have understanding, wisdom is found, but a rod is for the back of him that is void of understanding. Wise men lay up knowledge, but the mouth of the foolish is near destruction. The rich man's wealth is his strong city. The destruction of the poor is poverty. The labor of the righteous tendeth to life, the fruit of the wicked to sin. He is in the way of life that keepeth instruction, but he that refuseth reproof errors. He that hideth hatred with lying lips, and he that uttereth a slander is a fool. Now let's stop there for a minute and go back and pick up where we left off. Verse 11 says, the mouth of the righteous is a well of life. So it's almost like as long as you're doing what's right, it's like having water from a well, the well of life. But violence covereth the mouth of the wicked. And we just illustrated that when I spoke about the tow truck driver. Hatred stirs up strifes. And what are strifes? Hard times, hardship. And hatred stirs that up. Because why do people hate? What's in hatred? Nothing. It's you don't like them because of what? What they look like, what they are, what they do. Well, if you don't like somebody, just stay away from them. You don't decide to stir up a group and say, well, let's go beat them up or let's go rob them. We don't like them anyway. That's not the way, because it says love covereth all sins. So stay away from them. You don't have to take violence. It doesn't take violence if you don't like somebody. And the point is, Jesus didn't dislike anybody. He may not have liked some of their ways, but he never hated anyone. So we've got to learn to follow in his footsteps. And that's the whole purpose, to change our way of living so that we can live the way we should. Verse 13 says, in the lips of him that have understanding, wisdom is found. That's why we're reading. So we can get understanding, so we can get wisdom, so we can get knowledge. But a rod is for the back of him that is void of understanding. And to be void means without. So if you don't have any understanding, you're not going to even know where to begin to follow. That's why we have to study, read, meditate, and apply what we've learned. Wise men lay up knowledge. So that means that they're learning and they're keeping it in their heart and in their mind, and they're reading and they're rereading and they're learning more and more every day, because that's how you learn to live that way. And that's why so many of these verses kind of sound repetitious, because that's the point they want to get across. But the mouth of the fool is near destruction. Near destruction. And we already know what destruction is. That's ruin. That's ruin of yourself. So everything that they're saying, all these plots and plans and schemes, they're just bringing themselves closer to destruction. The rich man's wealth is a strong city. The destruction of the poor is their poverty. The labor of the righteous tendeth to life. So the harder you labor, the more earnest you are about following God's word. That gives you a longer life, a happier life, a more pleasant life. That's the whole point. But the fruit of the wicked leads to nothing. It's sin. There is no way out. He is in the way of life, keepeth the instruction, keepeth the direction, follows the direction. This is our manual. This is what we follow. But he that refuses reproof, and what did we say reproof was? Remember, we spoke about it last week. It's the reprimand, it's the scolding. We spoke about that. But it says here, he that refuses, ignores, doesn't want to hear. Last week we spoke wisdom, trying to give you advice about what to do and how to do it. And it says right here, if you refuse it, that's the biggest error you can make. Because you need guidance. You need reprimand. We spoke about how we have to do that with our kids. We tell them over and over again, don't do that, you're going to get hurt. Don't do this, you're going to get hurt. But they ignore us. They ignore us. Our kids ignore us when we try to prevent them from having harm until they fall or get hurt or whatever. And now it's too late. And this is what they're saying. That is a big error. And he that hideth hatred with lying lips. That means what we spoke about. They tell you one thing about, oh yeah, come on, it won't hurt anybody, we'll be okay. Come on and go with us. But maybe deep inside, they don't really like you anyway. You've got to be careful of what people say. You can't go by what people say. Watch how they act, who they're around. And he that uttereth slander is a fool. And slander is false allegations against people. That's how they get you to come along with them. Oh, don't listen to them. They're not talking about anything. You don't need to listen to that. Well, you do. You do need to listen. You do need to pay attention. Now, we're going to go on to verse 23. Because verse 23 says, it is as sport to a fool to do mischief. Well, what kind of way is that to have fun? That doesn't make sense. But to a man of understanding, he hath wisdom. The fear of the wicked, it shall come upon him. But the desire of the righteous shall be granted. As the whirlwind passes, so is the wicked no more. But the righteous is an everlasting foundation. Now that, just those few sentences right there. Verse 23, it is a sport. It's like fun to a fool to do mischief. So to them, it's great fun. Come on, let's go do this. It'll be fun. Just because we're going to harm somebody, take advantage of somebody they don't even know. Where's the fun in that? That shows how misguided they are. But a man of understanding hath wisdom. And that's what we're trying to accomplish. When we go through this every single week, we're trying to get more and more knowledge and more wisdom. It says the fear of the wicked, it shall come upon him. And we just spoke about that because it did. In the tow truck driver, the perpetrator, he lost out. It came back to haunt him. But the desire of the righteous shall be granted because God is watching over us. Verse 27 says, the fear of the Lord prolongeth your days, but the years of the wicked shall be shortened. The hope of the righteous shall be gladness, but the expectation of the wicked shall perish. So everything they're thinking about is not going to even happen. The way of the Lord is strength to the upright, but the destruction shall be the work of those of iniquity. So as long as we're doing what we should be, we'll always be strengthened by God. He will give us the strength to go forward, to do what we need to do. But destruction shall be the work of the iniquity workers. They'll destroy themselves. We spoke about that. The righteous shall never be removed, but the wicked shall not inherit the earth. So as long as we're following God's word, we're being the righteous ones, we shall never be removed. That's how we create generation after generation. Because what we learn, we teach our children. And what they learn, they teach their children. So we've got to stay on top of this, keep our knowledge going, our wisdom going, and all the goodness of God so that we can transfer it to our children. And that's why it says the righteous shall never be removed. That's generation after generation. The mouth of the just brings forth wisdom. And that's what we just said. Bringing it forth means you have to tell it to somebody. The mouth of the just. You don't just read it and keep it to yourself. But the froward tongue shall be cut off. And what did we say froward meant? The ones that are habitually inclined to be just disobedient. They don't want to hear anything you've got to say. They're not interested. They don't want to hear about direction. They don't want rules. They don't want regulation. They just want to do what they want to do. But it says, their tongue shall be cut out. The lips of the righteous know what's acceptable. And we do know because we're reading about it. Not just once a week, but daily. You've got to read these words daily. You've got to read them and understand them and meditate on them every day. Because the mouth of the wicked, all they speak is frowardness. So you've got to learn who to listen to, and then you've got to listen to what they're saying. Because just like Satan's not after your physical self. He's after your mind. Because that's where it all begins, in your mind. And if he can get you to start thinking the way he wants you to think, once it's in your mind, it starts growing. And then they say, well, it's going to be easy. Don't worry about it. You can do this. And sometimes you feel like, you're in a place where there's no way out. And I used to think about that. I thought about a nursery rhyme we used to say way back in the day. I don't know how many of you remember it. And it was called Humpty Dumpty. And what did it say? Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty Dumpty together again. And as I thought about that, because sometimes I'm in that kind of a place, I wrote this poem, and it's called God's Nursery Rhyme. And it goes like this. I once was like Humpty Dumpty, who sat upon a great wall. And just like Humpty Dumpty did, I also had a great fall. There was no one to pick me up from the place where I had been, but I knew that I had Jesus to put me back together again. He mends our hearts and cleanses our soul and guides us day by day, just like in the days of old, but his word we must always obey. Our lives sometimes are like nursery rhymes. We don't always understand, but the one thing that we know for sure is we're in God's unchanging hand. So I ask you, do you ever feel like that, like you're in a place where, you're down in a pit somewhere and you can't seem to find your way out? You just don't know what to do. Well, the good news here is, unlike Humpty Dumpty, we do have someone to pick us up and put us back together again. All you have to do is ask. God's always ready and willing to pick us up, dust us off, and put us back on the right path. All you have to do is decide that you're going to ask Him. So where are you today? I'm going to ask you, how do you feel? Are you satisfied with where you are today? Are you ready to trust God? Are you ready to believe that He can pick you up, dust you off, and put you back on the right path? We spoke about the paths, the wide path and the narrow path. We said the wide path was the quick fix, but it's only temporary. The narrow path, not as quick, but we know it's permanent. I've already chosen my path. Make your choice. My closing words today are, God's trusting you to trust Him. Don't disappoint Him. And until next week, I'm Delia Lewis. Thanks for joining me.